So in Dragonflight, Blizzard are increasing player health and creature damage by 40% across the board at level 70. I wanted to talk about how I think this is going to change up the healer meta. I actually think this is probably the largest shake up to the healer meta for quite a few weeks now on the beta. I'm going to be talking mostly about Mythic Plus, maybe a little bit about Raid. The blue post specifically mentions that Blizzard will be subsequently evaluating and considering adjusting a couple of things for PvP to see how this kind of turns out. So I'm going to wait to discuss the impact this might have on PvP until after we see what possible tuning there might be, or if Blizzard says they're happy with things the way they are, or however that goes. In general, though, I am a huge fan of this change. If this takes healing back to more of a Cataclysm sort of playstyle, where healers always found themselves pressing buttons, trying to conserve mana, be efficient with their spell selection and their healing options and things like that, I will be really, really happy. I think since Legion especially, healing has been, well, incoming damage patterns have been very spiky, and that has meant that being able to move health bars quickly has been the most important aspect of healing. And then whenever you don't have to move health bars quickly, you spend all of your time doing damage. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of this dealing damage being 50, 60, 70% of your kind of globals in a dungeon, or even PvP for that matter. So going back to hopefully a meta where healer spell selection, mana efficiency, and just throughput, time spent casting, combining abilities and things. A meta where that takes more focus or precedence, I'll be very happy with that. I will say that it looks like a lot of people are talking about this change as if this is going to be something that makes burst healing less important, whereas I think this will actually be the opposite. I think there will be some healers that will struggle to move health bars back up quickly or to keep up with incoming damage, and there'll be other healers that will really kind of excel at it. This also means that mana is going to become much more of an issue than it is now. This is kind of like a twofold result as well, because effectively just 40% more damage to heal, while also specifically for Mythic Plus, having what looks like a Mythic Plus seasonal affix that doesn't give mana back is going to be a big deal for some healers more than others. As an example, if you can right now head into a Mythic Plus and you can effectively heal an encounter by pressing one Vivify or Flash Heal or Regrowth or whatever the button is, one kind of casted heal per debuff tick or per mechanic, which for a lot of content you kind of can do that. That is effectively how a lot of these things work at the moment. Then you are spending however much mana it is on a boss fight, let's say, to press Regrowth 10 times for effectively 10 damaging events. Now with 40% more health and 40% more incoming damage, you might now have to spend 2 or 3 casts or 2 or 3 times as much mana to effectively move health bars just as much. And like I said, some healers are going to quite excel at this, and others are going to, I think, struggle with things being as they are at the moment. We don't know what further changes might be coming. Generally speaking, the big winners of this change are going to be healing specs that currently have a lot of overhealing. And I would say that is roughly at the moment Disciplined Priest, Resto Druid, and Holy Paladin. I could see a couple of other healers getting thrown into that mix, mostly Holy Priest if they started to gear more towards Mastery, and Evoker. So getting into, I guess, the first spec to talk about will be Holy Priest. Now, unfortunately, I don't have footage for every healer to play over when I'm talking about that particular healer, so we're just going to watch a dungeon run of something while I quickly talk about the different specs. Holy Priest. Having effectively more time for their mastery to do work, to tick, is a big win, especially considering how strong mastery is for their raw throughput if they gear for it. Holy Priest also gets a lot, like most of its damage, from a few globals. So if this increased incoming damage and increased health pool change ends up causing healers to spend more time casting heals, which I think it will, then a spec like Holy Priest that doesn't need a whole lot of globals to get their damage out is going to benefit a lot. The only kind of maybe downside I could see for Holy Priests is that at the moment they can get through a lot of content by really not doing much more than using Prayer of Mending on cooldown, Circle of Healing, a little bits of damage here and there, and using their holy words. Now, if those buttons stop being enough to keep up with incoming damage, they're going to have to spend more time and more globals and more mana on hard casted heals, which is going to make them a little less mobile. Holy Priests aren't very mana efficient at the moment, so this could be an issue, maybe. But like I said, they also have options to kind of adjust their spec, adjust their gearing, to get more sustained or efficient throughput if they need it. As far as Discipline Priest goes, I think Discipline is one of the big winners from this change, and that primarily comes down to them having very good burst healing with usually lots of overhealing. Generally that's going to be things like Divine Star does a lot of overhealing, Power Word Radiance does a lot of overhealing, Atonement does an absolute ton of overhealing. Discipline also has the option to burst a lot of healing, particularly through Atonement, particularly through their short-term kind of damage cooldowns. Schism buffed Penance, Mind Games, even though it's significantly worse now with the 50% nerf, but the throughput is still there. The other big benefit Disc has is that a lot of this type of healing for them is very mana efficient. At the moment in Mythic Plus, even up to like 23s, 24s and things, especially since the Power Word Radiance buff, the raw buff to how much healing it does on the cast itself, I almost always find myself in a situation where I'm doing some kind of like group AoE healing, and the Power Word Radiance cast itself will instantly top my team. It'll take people from 40% health to 100% health with one cast, which then means that the Atonement kind of back end to that Power Word Radiance really is just overhealing at the moment. Now with the change coming, something like Power Word Radiance into Atonement healing gets a lot more value. Even having the option of Power Word Radiancing back to back, very big group-wide healing. I just think Disc is in a fantastic spot to benefit from this. They also don't have the downside that a few other healers are going to have, and that of the damage dealing aspect, and that's just because Disc doesn't have to stop healing to do damage. It does damage all the time as a part of its healing rotation. So it's not like it's going to be spending more time on healing spells and less time on damage spells. It doesn't have to worry about that. So that's a win for them. Holy Paladin is another, I would say, winner, particularly in beta. The amount of raw throughput Holy Paladins do at the moment is kind of insane. And like I said before, specs that do a lot of throughput, a lot of burst healing, and ideally can do it efficiently, mana-wise, are going to, it's going to be a big, very good change for them. Holy Paladins getting a lot of value out of free healing into Beacon, I think will be quite strong. Even things like Light of Dawn that usually does a lot of overhealing, and then a lot of the Martyr if you're playing Marads after it, which almost always has an enormous component of overhealing to it, just because of how, even like Word of Glory, I mean, most of how Holy Paladin's toolkit, especially their Holy Power spenders, are just very high numerically tuned kind of throughput options. And at the moment, most of those do a lot of overhealing, and with 40% more incoming damage, 40% more health, a lot of that overhealing is just going to be extra throughput that they now have that doesn't really cost them anything. I would also say that, like I mentioned at the beginning, specs that have an abundance of burst healing are going to really like snipe the healing or outclass the healing of other specs that don't. This whole change, in my mind, it actually kind of means that the healing specs that do a lot of sustained throughput, lower level sustained throughput, are going to suffer, and the specs that have on-demand big burst healing are going to win. And that is Holy Paladin. Wings is just, it's a lot of throughput that they can have on demand. Holy Paladins also just really don't have mana issues at all at the moment, and they also can still get quite a lot of damage out without having to spend a lot of resources or globals on it. So again, that's just, yeah, Holy Paladins are going to win big from this, I believe. The Resto Shaman. The obvious win category for Resto Shamans is that maybe people spend more time at lower health and therefore Resto Shaman Mastery will be more impactful or important. I don't really think that's going to be the case. Like I said, I think the healers that can do the big burst healing on demand, that at the moment does a lot of overhealing, that in Dragonflight will just be a lot more healing, will kind of overshadow things like Resto Shaman Mastery. Perhaps not so much in Raid, but definitely in any other environment, really. I just don't see people being on low health for that long when there will be other healers that just have the raw throughput to top people straight back up, really regardless of how much damage is coming in. I also think similar to Holy Priest, with a lot of their throughput at the moment, or a lot of their kind of healing at the moment, being a few buttons that do a lot of work very quickly. I think Shaman's in the same boat in that most of their healing at the moment comes just from Riptide, and Riptide is strong enough that if someone in your party drops to half health, one Riptide will probably take them back into a very safe range, 90% health plus, which means that Resto Shaman really is a bit of a Riptide bot at the moment without the need to do much else outside of cooldowns or kind of like scripted damaging events. And I think with more health, more incoming damage, Riptide is probably going to start falling short in that category. The days of someone taking damage and dropping to half health and pressing Riptide once to top them back up are probably coming to an end, and Resto Shamans will have to spend a lot more mana and a lot more time and be locked in place a lot more, casting a second spell after something like Riptide to get people's health all the way back up. I said in previous videos about Resto Shaman that it was the healer that I felt like I had the most free globals on to do damage, even though those globals, since those previous videos, I believe most Resto Shaman, Chain Lightning, Lightning Bolt, the Flame Dot, Lava Burst and things have all been buffed by 20%. So Resto Shaman damage is still probably the lowest of all healers, but it isn't terrible. It isn't that far behind everybody else. But with this sort of change, where I assume they won't be able to just press Riptide and then go back to spamming damaging abilities, their damage is going to suffer more than other healers. Especially because they no longer have things like Vesper that give them the opportunity to get a lot of damage out with very few globals. If you want to do a lot of damage on Resto Shaman at the moment, you're going to be spending a lot of globals on Chain Lightning. And with more time, I'm guessing, spent hard casting heals, they're going to lose some of that time. So their damage is going to suffer. Resto Shamans also generally don't do very much overhealing. They will with some abilities, like Healing Rain in some situations, Healing Tide Totem. They're big kind of cooldowns, Ascendance, AG, but their normal moment-to-moment, global-to-global healing generally doesn't have, it's not very high throughput, it generally doesn't do much overhealing. So again, I think they might suffer quite a bit here. As far as Resto Druids go, probably the third spec that gets a big win out of these changes, and that one's pretty obvious. It's just much more time for Resto Druid HOTS to tick and kind of do their work. This sort of slower, more sustained or at least focused throughput is exactly what Resto Druid's niche is supposed to be in my mind. So this will be a great change for them just from a pure gameplay perspective. This also ideally means that there will be more time for Resto Druids to utilize or work around their mastery. So choosing which HOTS to stack on which targets to get the best value out of their mastery will be just a straight win for Resto Druids. Resto Druids also usually do quite a lot of overhealing. Things like Wild Growth, even just normal rejuves, Life Blooms. A lot of their toolkit at the moment does significant overhealing. So yeah, just having more damage coming in to eat up that healing that's effectively sitting there and not being used will be great for them. Resto Druids also do use quite a few globals to do damage, but because of their primarily hot healing, just the way the spec is designed, I don't think the increased incoming damage is going to mean they spend much more time hardcasting or have to trade away globals dealing damage to heal. I think this is kind of the change that is really almost made for Resto Druids. This is the sort of damage patterns that Resto Druids are built for. I also think that Resto Druids have a spec tree that is highly customizable. So they really do have the option to spec into heavy cooldown throughput if it's required, which could also be really quite strong. And finally, Mistweaver. Unfortunately, I think Mistweaver along with Resto Shaman are going to suffer the most from this change. And for me, the main issue for Mistweaver with this is really just going to come down to mana. Now, that being said, Mistweaver is probably the spec that I'm the least confident about my views on. I could be very wrong with this because on one hand, there's going to be, I'm guessing, a bit more time for Mistweaver hots to tick, renewing mists, their essence font, even rushing Jade Wind, developing mist. So they could get a lot more value out of those abilities. That also being said, I think Mistweavers already have mana issues, and I think just 40% more incoming damage is going to exacerbate that problem even more. Also, Mistweaver, the kind of name of the game is sustained throughput. They're not particularly spiky. That being said, in a somewhat maybe similar vein to Holy Priest, Mistweaver has the option to change their spec around to prioritize different aspects of their build, which could alleviate some of these issues. Things like leaning heavily into Yulons could be great because, I mean, look, Mistweavers have the ability to do huge amounts of healing, huge amounts of overhealing at the moment, even can be quite good at the efficient healing, but that is almost entirely dependent on fist weaving or ancient teachings healing with the Feline Stomp branch, and you also need multiple enemies to cleave for that to really function. The Mistweaver is the sort of spec where I could see it being fine, even excelling with this kind of change in some environments, but then in other kind of damage patterns, I think they could really struggle. If there's any content that Mistweavers are going to be stuck hitting a single target for, their fist weaving throughput really just isn't going to cut it at all. The real question is going to be, can their hot healing make up for that? At the moment, I don't know. We will have to see. The other minor issue that Mistweaver has is that Revival is extremely weak. From a raw spell power percentage healing perspective, Revival is nothing. The main benefit Revival has always had is that it's instant. It's always been the raid cooldown that does significantly less healing than other raid cooldowns, and there were times in the past where Revival was, half of your entire raid's health bar in one button, and it was really strong. But in Dragonflight, that just isn't really the case. There have been times where I've pressed Revival and not noticed it on health bars, and with 40% increased incoming damage, I mean, one of the major aspects of overhealing for every other healer in the game is that their major raid cooldowns do significant overhealing for the most part, unless they're doing content that they're extremely undergeared for, or they're pushing like world first bosses with no gear and things like that. But for the most part, something like Divine Hymn, Tranquility, Healing Tide Totem, Salvation, they're all buttons that do enormous amounts of overhealing, and at the moment they're all somewhat competitive with Revival, and we're about to go into a state of the game where the amount of damage going out during those cooldowns is going to increase a lot, but Revival is basically going to stay the same. Now, the 7th healer obviously is going to be Preservation Evoker. It's very difficult to say at the moment how I think this would affect them. Their throughput at the moment is quite high, and they've also got a couple of spells that directly scale off percentage health, which means 40% more health for everyone. It's just a straight up numerical buff to those spells. Things like Fly With Me, I think it's called now. With the associated talent that gives you and your target a shield for 30% of your health is just now 40% stronger. And the big one is Rewind. Rewind is Preservation's raid cooldown, very similar to Revival in that it's an instant cast, kind of numerically weak spell that has utility tacked onto it to make it strong. The difference is that the utility Rewind has is that it effectively undoes 50% of the damage taken by the raid. I believe it's for the past 4 seconds or 5 seconds. Now that's a raid cooldown that effectively scales off incoming damage. So 40% more incoming damage means that raid cooldown just got buffed by 40%. That's pretty big. The other one is I believe the Living Flame and Flame Breath talents that increase a scale with health. I imagine if they get kind of out of control, those things will just get tuned. But the main question mark for me on Evoker is that Evokers are a healer that is primarily resource starved. They aren't GCD starved or like cast speed starved. It's not like they're trying to fit a lot of buttons into a small time frame and therefore haste or those kind of things can help a lot. Instead, they're a healer that is really just dependent on resources and cooldowns. So the question becomes, is their throughput going to be enough that they can kind of just press the buttons as they do now, and those buttons will heal people or heal enough to not require more resources to heal the same mechanics? And if that's the case, preservation evokers will be quite good. If that isn't the case, they're going to suffer a little bit. We're going to have to see. At the moment, I'm not well versed enough with them to really have a good opinion on this one, but that will be it for now. Thanks for watching, and algorithm stuff.